My name is Anika Abrams. I'm at IT Alexander Center, and I'm grade 12 right now. Okay, first of all, I have a question directed at the guy in the red, the EFF.
Andile.
Hi there. First of all, I want to know, when you say black, who do you refer to?
So when I say I'm from black consciousness and I take seriously my philosophy of black consciousness, then when I say black, I mean all the people who are oppressed, so-called colored, so-called Indian and African people. When I say black, that's what I mean.
You made a statement that I personally think it was very profound when you said that you do not care about white people, and you also made an emphasis that you really don't. Right? I feel as a young person that what are you implying to us as young people when you say you do not care about white people? Are you trying to teach us that it's now our turn as black people to be racist among the white people? Secondly, and my question is, you are saying that you want our country to be socialist, right? Now what I want to know personally is that, are you excluding the white people when you're saying that you want our country to be socialist? I just want to find out that. Thank you.
My proposition is, I want you to think, and you ask as a young person, I want you to think black first. You know why I must think black first? When you drive into Khayelitsha, you know, when you see black people live in Ihoki, I want you to then ask yourself this question: is this how we must live in our country? Because if you don't do black first, you take it as normal and as natural that we must bus you and bring you into a taxi to come to town to talk amongst us here. It is natural, it's okay. It is not true that when we say black first, recognizing historical exclusion, that is racism. It is justice. We want justice, and that is why now we must insist black people must benefit. And socialism cannot be socialism for blacks only.
Because obviously there's not a monopoly on that intellectual tradition. I am no scholar on black consciousness, but I know at the age of 19 I met an individual who was imprisoned alongside Steve Biko, who took me in a sense under his wing as the young white South African with the particular experiences I would have had generationally, and spoke to me. And certainly the conclusions that I reached from him, and who I still meet to this day, do not necessarily translate to a raw racism or an acceptance that Marxism is the only solution and nationalization is the only way. Direct ownership by people, the issue of ensuring that when you do a just allocation and achieve social justice, it's not the government that remains the owner and the monopoly, but in fact people have got that direct share. I think that's fundamentally important. So in terms of ideology, I hope I've made it clear in terms of the starting point of the individual, but in terms of how you then achieve justice for all, you have to grow the economy. And fundamentally an 8% economic growth rate would double the income of South Africans, but it has to be done in the right policy environment. And it's clear from all the parties currently represented in Parliament on a major level that the plan to do just that has been blocked because of specific interests and factionalism. And I think that's the politicking that undermines confidence which people have.
I get very concerned when people seem to not respect democracy. When people seem to think the majority is some kind of stupid number of people who just put in X by ANC each time. Very, very wrong of us or anybody to undermine the brains, the capacity, the intelligence of the electorate. People who vote ANC look at their lives, they consider options available for them, they consider the history, they consider whether or not they can trust the organization of the African National Congress, they consider Nkandla, they consider Marikane, they consider the good, the bad, the ugly, the pretty, and they vote. They put the X where they want to.
Without doubt, things are much better than they were before 1994. No one should dispute that. However, to compare a situation of bad, which certainly if you look at levels of service delivery and protest, to a system of evil, and then conclude because it's not evil, it must be okay, is something that we think is perhaps not entirely acceptable. Rather, we should be a little bit more aspirational.
And the project I'm working on is based in the Cape Flats in a community, looking at people's experiences of peace and safety. And one of the things that have come up with the focus group we've done with youth is how gangsterism and gang violence is affecting young people, and how young people are afraid to go to school, afraid to walk home, and losing friends and family members. I would like to know from each one of you on how your party would address the issue of gang violence, particularly related to how you can empower youth in this regard. Thank you.
The system is horrid. You have South Africans who have to have human shields so their children can walk to school. That happens in this city. I spoke earlier about there's an interconnectedness. Now that problem is a problem that we should together deal with. You can't deal with it as a crime problem. It's not a matter of there aren't enough policing. It's the question as to Manenberg, as an example, is structurally a place in which you cannot live in hope. You can't live with a sense of dignity. You have schools that fail children. You have schools that are still prefabricated, that aren't properly resourced. You have police stations that aren't properly resourced. Now that's a problem that you can't deal with and simply say, let's send an army in, let's send in more police, because that's not the problem. It's a social problem, and it's the fabric of that society that is broken. And the only way to deal with it is systemically, where you work with communities, where you work with government in order to deal with those issues.
Gangsterism are a direct outcome of the conditions of the people. The biggest drug lords and gangsters are those that make policies that exclude our people in the Western Cape. If you go to Manenberg, as I have in Mitchell's Plain, no young person can grow under those conditions and not engage in gang warfare. So the policies that we have created and we're continuing, in fact in Manenberg, it's shocking. You are saying you're upgrading there, the flats. They are putting our people in containers. In containers. They don't respect black people.
The first thing, it's just an observation, is that there are no women on the panel, which is quite disappointing. Okay. The second thing is that, okay, so we know that only 32% of young people registered, of Born Frees registered for the elections. And I think this is a result of the fact that young people have been left with the legacy of apartheid, left to pick up the shattered pieces. But I think a lot of people don't have the language to even articulate how to even go about dealing with the legacy of apartheid. And in fact, I'd argue that a lot of young people don't even understand the context that they're in right now. They don't even understand, like, they were born after 1994 and they left to pick up all of these pieces. So I think there's a big sense of hopelessness and despondency among young people. And everyone's on the panel has stressed the importance of youth and how it's important for youth to participate. So when the gentleman behind me, okay, he's not here with the glasses, when he asked the question about only 32% of youth registered, everyone on the panel said, oh, well, it's just disappointing, and you made comparisons with, you made international comparisons. But now what I would like to know is, I don't think it's just okay to leave it at it's disappointing that only 32% have registered. What can be done to spark the youth's interest? And as I think the gentleman from Akang said, encourage the youth to value their agency. What can be done to actually do that, to get the youth to actually come out and vote, instead of just leaving the problem as it is? Thank you.
Okay. The reason young people don't vote is because it's such a complicated process. You need to go to a voting station on a particular day, over a weekend. You have to fill out forms. It's unsustainable. The question is, why should we have a registration process? Why shouldn't it just be as simple as, once you have an identity document, you are registered on the database? What is this requirement? And if you missed a voter weekend, you have to go into a local office, which means you need to find a local office. You walk into the local office, and because of the red tape, what young person wants to do that?
Okay, my name is Atwile Barbara. I'm from Philippi High School. My school is made up of shacks, but it's just like any other school, but it's for black students only.
Can you please stand? Okay. Thank you.
So my question, I find it ironically that you guys were invited here to talk to the youth, but you don't know the reason why the so-called Born Frees didn't register to vote. I want to ask that, did you guys go out to find the reasons why these Born Frees didn't register to vote? Thank you.
We have depoliticized and basically miseducated young people in this country deliberately in the past 20 years. When there is June 16, the ANC makes it into a jiving session. Instead of talking about what actually happened there, It was a deliberate process of depoliticization. I want to say it is an indictment in society that young people 20 years later must sit here and have the burden of transformation. In normal societies, young people are involved in poetry and love and discovering life, not worrying about big questions of a house and education. Those things must be taken for granted. We have enough wealth in this country. We can make it possible that young people grow up as normal people, but it's going to take radical political positions. And young people, again, just like in 76, just like in the 80s, just like the French young children in 68, they're going to have to rebel against the system. And I'm on the side of rebellion. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're against the terminology of born free. I thought Andile might address this issue that white people have been born free for quite a long time in South Africa, and I don't know how we have this term born free, unless you mean of guilt because of oppressing the majority. But that guilt, I'm sure Andile will agree, should still be there due to the economic dispensation. Maybe our friend from the DA can also agree, based on the 79.8% of top jobs being in white hands in the Western Cape, that white people shouldn't be free of that guilt. So I don't know on what basis this term born free comes from. We talk of a Mandela generation, and we see the Mandela generation as being a group of people born into a country as Mandela being the president.
When you give someone a house, you're not doing someone a favor. It's their right. When you write a policy that contextualizes a wage that makes someone unlivable, you oppress people. Now I want to ask to the ANC and the DA representatives specifically, how can you oppose the sharing of land and resources amongst black and white people? And when I say black, I speak in a Bikoist consciousness. So in that context, how can you oppose the sharing of resources when you have petitioned the private sector, as well as our friend from the ANC have petitioned the private sector for equal sharing, and you have not been successful in 20 years? How can you oppose nationalization? How can you oppose the sharing of resources? Thank you.
If you want to talk about this issue of transformation, let's give an example of where corruption and mismanagement fundamentally undermines that agenda. If you take a city like this, we've got just 3 train stops from here, a bulk of area of land that belongs to national government, obviously a confiscation and inheritance from the past. How many times we have petitioned to take that land to ensure mixed-use development integrated in line with our densification policy to bring people closer to the core, and how many times those letters have fallen on deaf ears because the minister will say, well, our department's in a dysfunctional state, therefore what can we do? So I do think that we've got to look at how that issue undermines effectively the poor and delivering to people.